Okay, guys, let's. We have Andrew. Where are you? Do you want to introduce yourself? We have one addition.
Yes, Andrew White's my name, founder and CEO of FundApps. Pretty simple remit what we do. We keep hedge fund managers out of jail. No, we don't. We ensure that hedge funds comply with a rake and plethora of regulations that they have to comply with. So whether it's UCITS monitoring, disclosure requirements, short selling, disclosure monitoring, any kind of regulation where the hedge fund manager is not making any money out of it but has to do it, we jump in the breach. We have a team that looks after the regulation. We code the regulation into algorithms and we provide it all via cloud service. Really simple, but quite good fun. We've got a number of clients already. We're based in East London, so that's what we do.
Okay, this is a very simple format. Questions out to the audience, and let's give the panel a chance to answer them. So first question, please.
Hi. What do you think are the interesting technical stacks going on in finance right now, and what are people moving to? I mean, you mentioned Python already. Is that what you think the industry is moving to? I've heard lots of people using Haskell. Is that it, or well, what's your opinion?
I'll start because I've got the easiest opinion. These two guys are going to blow me out of the water. We choose whatever tech gets the job done as easily as possible. We're not into HFT. We need a very nice GUI. We need responsive websites. We need a performance system that we can maintain, and maintainability is what it's all about. We're in compliance, so it's all about test-driven development. Every single rule we write has to have a test behind it to make sure the rule works. So we're a .NET shop, but I certainly think from our kind of tech horizon, things like document databases, NoSQL are certainly things we'll invest in. The normal tech or the stuff that Graham will talk about, that's certainly the future from the trading side of things.
So we divide things into sort of banks and non-banks, right? The banks, the tech stack is extraordinarily simple, and it's the exact same at every single bank. There is a commercial SQL database that is the official system of record. It is always Sybase or Oracle that is running on Linux or Solaris. Java is the only thing that's talking to it. That is talking to a middleware system that is going to be something from Tibco or IBM, and then the front end is going to be a custom-written .NET app. So absolutely anything you're seeing at a bank, that is the exact tech stack. At hedge funds, we've seen about maybe 10 to 20% are .NET shops. And when they're .NET shops, they are Windows everything. They're using SQL Server. They're actually paying Windows licenses for servers. They're writing stuff in .NET. Otherwise, I think Mike hit on the exact thing, which is they want a stable backend system that they can deal with. So they like buying stuff that's written in Java or C or C++, anything that they can get to, but they don't want their developers writing it, right? So they have web tech running for UIs. They're using Python a lot. I've seen, we have exactly one hedge fund client that's using Ruby, and they know how rare that is. Everybody else is Python and hedge funds. They like Java on the back end because they can deploy it cheaply to Linux. Lots of Postgres, lots of NoSQL. We don't see any NoSQL in banks. And yeah, front end, Excel. Excel, Excel, Excel. If you talk to Excel, the traders and risk managers are happy. If you don't, you're wasting precious screen real estate.
Yeah, I can't really add that much more to that. I think Kirk's right. I mean, maybe a slight caricature of the technology stack in banks that, you might find some variation on that, but I think it's hard to characterize the whole industry by grand themes because, lots of people do lots of different things depending on what they're comfortable with. To me, that the real formula for success is start with really, really good people. Largely the reason we ended up using Python is, well, I like it myself, but then also I hired a couple of guys who I knew very well who were very good at it, and that's what they wanted to use, so that's what we used.
Just one other thing is you will occasionally find firms, particularly in the buy side, that characterize their tech stack by being eccentric, right? So Jane Street does everything in OCaml, right? And they're well known as, we're the OCaml shop. So if you actually did OCaml because you went to a university that taught it and you really want to do it, they go there. There are a few Scala shops. It's quite rare to find people actually writing it. we've seen the odd Haskell shop, but the Ruby shop, R shop, but they're all kind of defined by being an exception to the rule, and they think that being the exception gives them some form of advantage, whether it's a hiring advantage or a technology advantage. So like I can give the broad caricature, right, but there are always exceptions going on to any of these general rules.
I think if you look at running an organisation like a bank, for example, you've got to look at what skill sets are actually out there. And I think, to be honest with you, Java is a very good general purpose language with good performance, and there's a huge library and a huge number of programmers that's well understood. I think C# also falls into the same category. I think some really good software available in C#, and there's plenty of programmers. So really, why would you not choose to write things in Scala? Because there's not many Scala programmers. Why would you choose to write things in Haskell, Scala, etc.? Because basically maybe you're a bit of a language expert and you went to Cambridge and you think it's really cool to use functors and monads and all that sort of nonsense, you know. But quite frankly, really, most people don't understand these terminology. They want a simple, straightforward language. I think one of the overlooked languages is possibly Erlang, but that's the same thing. Not very many people do it out there. It's a great language, well designed, it's very small, very easy. Lua, fantastic language, very straightforward, very simple, very easy. Not very many people do it, but as I say, it's used in World of Warcraft. I did some work at wherever I was before, which I'm not allowed to mention. But basically, we built a rules engine using Lua JIT. And it just was phenomenally fast. It was like ran 40, 50 lines of Lua code in between 60 and 90 nanos per rule. Now that is just ridiculous. I said, how does it do this? And if you look at basically the guy Mike Powell who's behind Lua JIT, he's written a dynamic optimization of runtime instructions, not just loop unfolding, etc., that you get in Java. This is like the next generation of sort of like optimizing compiler. And it's available and people have got some really good results with it. And it's an easy language to learn. So my prediction going forward is, as I say, stick to the mainstream stuff. Avoid the esoteric sort of like, how can we say, weird stuff like OCaml, Haskell and Scala. Lua is a good bet. It's a good easy language that your kids could learn, quite frankly. So that's my sort of like take on it.
Hi there. I'm curious, since you guys work a lot with open source and OpenGammers, obviously the system is open source, how do different clients respond to that, both, you know, that offering open source and you guys using open source, and what are the kind of responses to different licenses? So you guys are Apache, I think. So how has that been?
Go first. Okay. The answer is it depends. So hedge funds tend to get it, right? And I think, you know, what I was saying earlier about the kind of top end of the bell curve, you've got people that are motivated, that natively seek out open source technology, that say, I'm going to do development, obviously I'm going to go for open source. So they kind of get it already, right? Where we have problems with the open source discussions tends to be with legal departments or procurement departments, my favorite bugbear, at large non-mainstream financial hub-centered banks. So, you know, think banks in continental Europe that aren't Frankfurt, Paris. Think American banks that aren't New York, Connecticut, Chicago. Very often they aren't used to it, and there's still some evangelism going on. We chose the Apache license very specifically. So we went through the full panoply of open source licenses. And aside from the fact that, you know, I've been a fan of the Apache license for a while because I started my career doing open source work, it has two things that financial customers like. The first is, unlike the BSD and MS and MIT licenses, it has some treatment of patents. One of the biggest things that people pay us an annual subscription fee for is an IP indemnification where we provide a warranty and waiver against patent infringement claims, right? So banks are absolutely scared to bits about the next patent troll going after them for use of open source technology. The second thing, though, is they absolutely hate viral licenses. They hate copyleft licenses. And a lot of that is irrational because they don't actually understand what things like the GPL actually say. But I don't care as long as they don't understand the GPL, and as long as Stallman shows up and tries to undo everything that commercial open source vendors are trying to do with the market, it means that I have to play by the rules of what they're doing. So the Apache license offers the best of both worlds. It has the non-copyleft nature of the MIT and BSD with the patent treatment. If you don't care about copyleft, by the way, perhaps according to our IP attorney, probably the best open source license out there from a legal perspective is the Eclipse public license, which is not surprising given that it was written by IBM's patent attorneys. So if you actually want the kind of highest quality, go with the Eclipse license, which is a really weak copyleft, but just enough of a copyleft that we didn't feel comfortable using it.
I'll just throw in a tidbit from 3 or 4 years ago. I was selling to HSBC. They eventually bought, thank God. And they actually actively looked out for open source components that were using our software. So it wasn't just left field banks in continental Europe. They actually had to get a list of every single component, even down to a 15-line add-on that gave you some GUI element. And we had to defend the choice of using each of those, even though it didn't really matter to HSBC. It was just, as Kirk says, it was the procurement department and the legal department that wanted to do this. So traditionally it's a problem, but without doubt, the last 3 to 4 years, it's got a lot better. And now some people actively seek it out and realize should be a good thing for their business.
So on that, we're at the moment in a procurement negotiation with a large financial institution that, of course, I cannot name. And one of the parts of due diligence to the procurement department is being able to run out a list of every third-party open source component that we depend on with its license attached to it. So we've relied very heavily on the work that we did in componentization. So we use Ivy internally, and so it's just a process that we can run that will spit out that entire dependency graph, because at the moment, if you download OpenGamma, it's about 1 million lines of code that we've written with, I think we're up to, 80, 90 required third-party jar files. And they just want to make sure that we actually have the due diligence internally to make sure we are not accidentally linking against a pure GPL license that will then go through the whole thing. So there's absolutely that justify everything else you're using kind of mentality that goes on when you're dealing with open source in larger financial institutions.
In terms of marketing products, have you noticed any peculiarities in terms of differences in geography? If you market to hedge funds, say in US versus UK and versus Asia, if any of you sell there, and also have you seen kind of a take up from the traditional asset managers like mutual funds for the products that you market to hedge funds?
I'll definitely take that question. We have currently a handful of clients. One is a huge investment bank, one is a huge fund administrator, one is a small hedge fund. So we've sold to them all. They're incredibly different in their approach, but sometimes contradictory. So you would traditionally think that small, nimble hedge funds are all about new technology and are about getting the best bang for the buck, and that old asset managers are going to be very traditional. We've recently more or less signed a deal with a very traditional Dutch bank who basically said to us, you're the only guys that can offer it via the cloud. You're the only guys that can offer it, on an iPad. We want this. We don't care about the others. We've had hedge funds that said, we want it all in-house. We would never use the cloud. We hate it. It's stupid. It's never going to take off. So you'll definitely see, depending on basically the mentality of the company. And because it's normally in-house guidelines or in-house policy that defines this. There's no, for what we do, there's no EU directive that says you can't, send your funds somewhere else for checking. So it's just a personal or a company opinion that we don't do this. Geography-wise, very interesting. We have clients, as I said, in Brazil, in the UK, and in America. It's down to the company. Certainly the UK and the Anglo-Saxon countries are slightly, thank God, a bit ahead on the curve. If you talk to the Germans, they're not very cool with the whole giving your data away and cloud compliance. The Swiss, obviously, a bit of secrecy going on there. So it is a geographical thing, but trend is, without doubt, that they see the cost advantages and the functionality advantages they get through the cloud. So that's our experience.
Just in terms of geography, so we do a lot of very quantitative finance software, and all of our customers thus far have offices in at least one, usually two, of Chicago, Manhattan, Western Connecticut, i.e. Stamford and Greenwich, London, Geneva, and Zurich. Right, so for us, things are very highly centralized. Now, things are starting to branch out for us, but more they're branching out on the sell side rather than the buy side, right? The people that do really quantitative hedge funds are really geographically concentrated, right? They really are only in a few places. Asia, they're in Singapore and Hong Kong, and that's it. Right, so you can kind of put people on the ground exactly where they are. There may be an outlier, right? Like there's a West Coast U.S. hedge fund that's based in, actually I'm not going to say the city because it'll identify them, that is, I didn't say where it was, that's in contact with us, but they're an outlier. It's one of these, the one exception that proves the rule, right? Like the one hedge fund that's using OCaml or Haskell or whatever. And they're aware that they're unique. They're aware that you have to travel specifically for them. There's a real cluster effect in this stuff, and it's Switzerland, London, Connecticut, New York, Chicago.
I'll tell you a funny story because it's late. I wrote a system at basically Deutsche Bank, which is called Raptor, and it won the most innovative product of the year award in 2003. And what it basically did was it monitored the OMS and looked at every single order and then graphed it. So if you look at basically the way that the trades were and the volumes, you had essentially the bigger the blob, the bigger the volume. So you could see New York, you could see Chicago, fairly big. You could see London, fairly big. Frankfurt, fairly big. Africa didn't exist, none whatsoever. You can see a little bit of stuff in Asia, and right in the middle was this huge, great big white blob, and that was Switzerland. It was a huge trading hub. So really, as you say, there is a geographical sort of center. If you looked at it, that's actually echoed by the data centers. The major data centers financially in the world, the major markets are in Chicago, in New York, NY2, NY4. In basically London, obviously the Slough, the LDs, and the Telehouse. In Frankfurt, where basically you've got the German market, and in Zurich, where basically you've got the Swiss market. So it is actually got a physical relationship, and it's got a market relationship as well.
Yeah, speaking of that, one of the things, so we're in the process of getting ready to launch some cloud-hosted services ourselves, and we can't use AWS or Rackspace or any of the typical guys for anything that our customers want, because latency matters. An 80-second transatlantic round trip or 100-second millisecond round trip to AWS East actually matters if you're trying to do market data distribution or any of that. Look at where Rackspace, AWS are. They're nowhere near the financial centers that people care about, right? They're in places that they have cheap power and cheap tax laws, right? So that's not relevant, and we look at it and say, well, rather than, for a situation like Renshaw Bay, where it's I need to scale up, do a bunch of Monte Carlo simulations, scale it down again, then yeah, it doesn't matter where it is because it's not latency sensitive, or you can organize around that. But there are no major like cloud IaaS solutions that are available anywhere near the M25 in London. I don't care where it is. Slough is fine. Canary Wharf's fine. Any of that stuff's fine. None of them are in Switzerland at all. You know, it's just none of them are in New York. You've got to end up paying a monstrous amount and organize around the fact that you need to have at least a rack of servers in Secaucus. You need to have a rack of servers in Slough. You need to have a rack of servers in Geneva. You need to have a rack of servers in the most unbelievably expensive building in the world, which is the which is the CME data center building right on the river in Chicago, and is a gorgeous building and a gorgeous location, but damn, is it expensive to rent a server in.
Okay, we can take one more question, I think.
Considering this event is innovations in hedge fund technologies, all the things we've spoken about, the question I'm going to pose is something I've been playing with myself, is a lot of the things mentioned, open source, lots of different terminology. It's not new technologies. They're things that have been around for a while. And so my question is, what, in the panel's opinion, is a true innovation in sort of the financial technology space?
Very deep. I pose a question back to you. Why do we need new technology? I think the biggest problem in financial service was the business model. It was inefficiency, it was cost, it was backhanders, it was intransparent funds that you didn't know what the hell they were investing in. It was a whole rake of shit, if you mind my language, that is now through technology becoming more transparent, more compliant, faster, better, So technology is innate. Technology is there for a reason, to make it all better. And certainly there are some highlights for the more technically minded in what we're talked about here. But at the end of the day, I think it's a whole new way of doing business, which is cost saving, transparency, and things like that are more important than just pure shiny knobs and whistles.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I think by its very nature, financial services isn't exactly an industry that's positioned to actually innovate in the sense of creating new technology that didn't exist before. It's going to be an adopter of the stuff that's coming out of I don't know, scientific research communities, or the web-based development, or other fields. Like, I mean, to the extent that there's maybe scope for innovation, it might be in the HFT or something like that, where having the right technology actually can make the difference between your firm succeeding or failing. But for most of the financial industry, sad to say, as a technology guy, technology is there to support the business. It's not there to lead the business, and it's about meeting the needs of the business efficiently and effectively.
I think one thing just to pen onto that is exactly that for the last 20 years and further on in asset managers and banks, it's been a case of the tail wagging the dog. It's been technology departments that have ruled what the bank did. I've seen cases where a technology department has shot down a very good business proposition that would have saved the business arm probably millions of pounds over a year or two. So it's this case of actually doing what we're talking about and actually thinking about it from the business point of view, not technology, which was the traditional way of doing it.
So I think probably the only person on the panel that's actually doing really innovative technical work is Graham, and so I'm going to make him take the mic after this. But I think finance tends to be the second adopter, right? So I think when it comes to pure technology innovation, pure technology companies tend to do the first round of innovation, right? So a lot of the work that we're seeing, that especially hedge funds are the first range adopters of things like NoSQL, right? Banks aren't using Cassandra and Voldemort and Redis and all of that stuff, whereas hedge funds are, right? All of those things were coming out of the web scale stuff. Voldemort is LinkedIn, Cassandra's Facebook, Redis. Who did Redis originally? So YouPorn. And now VMware, now that it's been scrubbed of that. So there's, but the financial services industry tends to be the second wave adopter. And the hedge funds tend to be the leading edge of that wave, right? So I think we're in some ways the litmus test of what is kind of good and general purpose enough to escape out of the web stuff, right? But I think Graham should talk, because all the techies here were fascinated by his talk, because there actually is real innovation there. And by the way, I agree with you on the fee cards.
The year 2000, I was a member of the financial cryptography movement, which was inspired by a guy called David Wyatt, who's the genius behind Crest, and he had this idea of basically bearer settlement. What the idea was that basically you had cryptographically signed instruments and contracts that basically roamed in a sort of trading engine, and settlement was instantaneous, and there was no middle, back, front office. To me, that was an innovation, and that was a really clever idea, but it was killed by the banks, because until people like, my age are sort of like dead or move on or basically go become farmers or whatever, there's not going to be a change in the whole technology sphere that we've got. And I think one of the things that blocks innovation is, basically organizations that essentially have siloed people and teams, etc. So really, I think there's a whole lot of basically old guys need to be moved on and basically bring in sort of like fresh ideas, but that's not going to happen easily. This is why it's much easier for basically startup organizations. Like if you look at the work that's going on in microfinance, there's an awful lot of work in basically sort of like, innovation in Africa, wireless infrastructures. They don't have the rubbish that we've got. They can basically start from scratch and take governance models and basically innovate into new markets and build a new sort of culture. So that's basically where I think a lot of the innovation is going to come from. If you look at the way I think trading is going to go, one of the things I've been working on for many years is essentially I was involved in research a long time ago with UBS, and basically one of the things we were told was we had to manufacture research to support a sales position. That was wrong, and basically that's now been research. It's been hived off, but really, so if you look at the whole sort of idea management sort of like game and social networking and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of sort of like effort that basically is going to be put into that area where people are going to innovate and use essentially sort of crowd intelligence, etc. And really, I think my prediction is going to be that basically people are going to use an intelligence approach to trading going forward, rather than the purely quantitative stuff that we do just now, because no matter what they tell you, you can't predict the future. It's not possible. So any models are just that. They're basically a guesstimate or guesstimation. What you can do, however, and this goes back to these two young gentlemen I was talking to earlier on, is you can build up a sort of like a map of people and their relationships. So if you look at analyzing news, you can extract entities that are nouns, like names, dates, places, times, locations, and sectorize it, and then basically visualize that sort of like temporal stream, and then basically either play it in front of a human being who's got a vast capability to do pattern recognition, and then back up that's a decision they make up by basic algorithmic analysis. So one of the things we did for Raptor was the researchers would say, buy this or sell that. So we had a fantasy portfolio, and we'd do exactly what they said. And at the end of the year, we'd say, here's your bonus based on your performance. And they didn't like that because we could measure them for a change. And I think we're going to see the application of intelligent techniques into finance, where basically, people will be intelligence-led, because at the moment there's a lot of, how can we say, dark networks and dark information that never sees into public sort of sources, and people, I'm not saying they manipulate prices, but people communicate information that essentially isn't in public governance. And I think I would like to see that brought into a sort of like more governance-oriented framework that's algorithmically analysed and monitored, and you can actually sort of like basically do much better sort of analysis post-trade. That's my prediction.
Okay, well, on that note, thank you very much, guys.